Have you ever heard a story about something that was supposed to be perfect, but then it all just fell apart? Well, that's what we're diving into today. We're talking about a kingdom designed to be a perfect reflection of peace and God's rule on earth, but it ended in betrayal, civil war, and a nation literally torn in two. So let's get into it and uncover how King Solomon's model nation didn't just stumble, it completely collapsed. So there's a biblical writer who we call the Chronicler, and he paints this just incredible picture of Solomon's reign. He presents it as the absolute ideal, a kingdom of profound peace, the perfect blueprint for how a nation should be run under God. This was the dream. This was what it was supposed to be like. Which, of course, brings us to the big question. If this was the perfect model, why did it end so badly? How did it lead to such a bitter, messy division? Well, as we're about to see, the reality simmering just under the surface was, well, it was far from perfect. Okay, so let's start with that perfect facade. You have to understand, the chronicler wasn't just writing a history report. He was telling a story with a very clear message about God's will and the massive cost of straying from it. Before all the trouble started, this was the vibe. This was the pledge. All the different tribes of Israel came to King David, who was Solomon's dad, with this powerful statement of unity. They were all in. One kingdom, one dynasty, one shared future. This is our before picture, when everything looked rosy. But you know how it is? Beneath that perfect surface, something was going really, really wrong. The day-to-day reality of Solomon's rule was actually pretty harsh, and this deep, simmering resentment was starting to boil over among the people. And just like that original, beautiful pledge of loyalty, it got completely flipped on its head. People started asking, hey, what future do we really have with this dynasty? What's in it for us anymore? That unity was cracking from the inside out, and it all boiled down to one single core issue. And that issue was something called conscripted labor. Now, this wasn't about paying taxes with money. No, this was a system where people had to physically leave their farms, their families, and their own jobs to go work on the king's grand projects, sometimes for months at a time. Think about it like this. For a chunk of the year, maybe a few months, your labor was essentially being taxed at a rate of 100%. Everything you did, everything you produced with your own two hands during that time, it belonged to the state. It was an unbelievably heavy burden, and people were understandably getting sick of it. And this brings us to the breaking point. Solomon dies. His son, Rehoboam, has to travel north to get these very unhappy tribes to accept him as their new king. And they come to him with just one simple request. This is the big showdown. The people's plea is straightforward. Look, your dad's rule was tough. Lighten the load, and we will serve you. But Rehoboam, ignoring the advice of his wise elders, doesn't just say no. He threatens to be even tougher, famously saying his father disciplined them with whips, but he would use scorpions. It was a massive, fatal miscalculation. And the result is immediate and violent. The northern tribes revolt. They find the guy in charge of the forced labor, Adoram, and they stone him to death. A full-blown civil war seems like it's about to erupt, but a prophet named Shemaiah steps in and manages to prevent the worst of the bloodshed by reminding everyone their family. The split, however, was now permanent. So now the kingdom is split in two, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. And this is where the chronicler's perspective becomes so crucial. He doesn't frame this as just a political failure. No, for him, this is a moral story with a clear hero and a clear villain. To make his case, the chronicler uses Rehoboam's successor, King Abijah of Judah. In this really pivotal speech, Abijah completely reframes the whole rebellion, and he assigns blame in a very, very specific way. Okay, so check out this spin. In the chronicler's version of history, Rehoboam's terrible decision is basically excused. He was just inexperienced and young. But Jeroboam, the guy who led the rebellion against forced labor, he's painted as an ambitious scoundrel who took advantage of a naive king. See how the blame gets completely shifted from the oppressive ruler to the guy leading the rebels? This whole framing, this whole setup is leading to the chronicler's final moral lesson. The story doesn't just end with the kingdom being divided. It ends with a judgment that's meant to prove his entire point. So King Abijah of Judah goes to war with Jeroboam's army, which is much, much larger.
But the chronicler presents Abijah not as some mighty warrior, but as a humble king who puts his trust in God. And because of that faith, he wins a massive victory, totally defeating the scoundrel Jeroboam and even reclaiming lost territory.
And this brings us to the chronicler's ultimate point. This whole saga, it isn't really about tax policy or political ambition. The message is that real strength isn't found in Rehoboam's arrogance or in Jeroboam's scheming. It's found in humility and in trying to be faithful to God's will.
And that leaves us with this final thought to chew on. We've all heard the phrase, history is told by the victors. The chronicler is telling this story from the perspective of Judah, the southern kingdom. His story defines victory not just as winning a battle, but as being morally and spiritually right. It kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? How do the stories we tell ultimately shape our understanding of who the real heroes and villains actually are?